This is Gary Sly and the Legacy of Handmade Objects. I'm here in the shop on a Saturday afternoon. I thought I'd go ahead and tape an episode today since I'm not going to be in town next Monday. There's a bunch of stuff going on here in downtown Leesburg today. There's a Western pub crawl happening here in a little bit. So there's quite a bit of rambling around down here, and it's possible somebody will come in and ring the door while I'm talking, but I'm going to carry forward. I was very excited this past week to see that my own guild, the Embroiderers Guild of America, had a wonderful piece highlighting Tatreez, which is a Palestinian embroidery style that has been around for many, many years and is a wonderful representation of Palestinian culture. So one of the reasons I was excited about it is because I've had Tatreez embroidery here in my shop for some time. A friend of mine in my own Weavers Guild has family that lives in Palestine, and she has a number of times helped me to get stuff to sell here in the shop that was made in Palestinian refugee camps. So I want to take just a minute and talk some about Tatreez embroidery. You've seen some pictures of some of the items here in my shop, give you a little bit of the history and the significance of it, and show you some of the wonderful pieces that I have here. The fact that these were done in refugee camps is particularly significant, I think, as we think about people and the conflicts that are going on over in that area today. Tatreez, we know, has been around for about 3,000 years, if not longer. In the area traditionally known today as Palestine, it would have been called Canaan by some of the earlier inhabitants. And when you think about the Hebrew scriptures and some of the Jewish histories, that's often how you will see that land referred to. The designs and the colors that are used in Tatreez are intended to tell stories. They're part of a visual way of carrying forward the culture and the heritage of the Palestinian people. That's true with much needlework. And so, even with some of the things that are on the wall behind me and some of the things that I've talked about through the weeks here on my series, quite often what we stitch reflects who we are and what our background is and what's important to us. So the colors and the designs that you see in Tatreez embroidery will often tell us something about where the person lives, their village or the region that they're part of. Usually in the traditional Tatreez, not so much in the stuff that I have here, but in the traditional Tatreez, different colors represented marital status. For instance, an unmarried woman would use blue threads. Married woman might use a bright red thread for her embroidery. And if one were widowed, they'd probably use a combination of those two colors. You can also see distinctions in Tatreez embroidery based on social class. Now, of course, what you would most likely see if we were in a traditional Palestinian village would be the use of the Tatreez embroidery for clothing. There's the traditional dresses that the women wear. The embroidery would be used in all kinds of ways to embellish sleeves, collars, shawls, just whatever it is that people would use. And the materials would reflect the importance of the use. If you were making something for a wedding, for instance, you might use silk threads and very fine fabric. For other more everyday kind of events, you might not use things that are quite as expensive. Little girls would have begun to learn to do Tatreez embroidery, studying with their moms and particularly their grandmothers, beginning at about the age of 6 or 7. And it was very much a way of teaching the culture and the heritage of the Palestinian people to their children through Tatreez embroidery. Now it was in Palestinian culture traditionally a woman's work, and would have been passed along through the girls and women in that culture. It was often, and still is, a community activity where women could come together and work on embroidered pieces, share the gossip and the news of the day, and kind of solve the world's problems. And I suspect even today in a refugee camp situation, you might find that same sort of women's gatherings that would allow them to perfect their work, teach younger people how to do it, and also talk about and reflect upon the events of the day. I love the pieces that I have here, and I'm going to hold them up and talk about them here in just a minute, because one of my favorite things to stitch are geometric patterns. And these reflect lovely, repetitious geometric designs, very bright colors. I was reading some stuff about the significance of some of the geometric designs, and florals also for that matter. If one were traditionally from the area called Gaza, you might see cypress trees as a representation of that area. Ramallah, another town that you probably heard about in the news, would use bright red colors and perhaps palm trees because it's a more of a desert kind of setting. And then Bethlehem, which is significant both for Christians and for traditional Palestinian folks who've lived in that area for many years, developed the motif of an 8-pointed star, which you'll see in all kinds of different stitching motifs all around the world. Tatreez uses mostly cross stitch, and it can be done just kind of freehand or by using patterns, but you'll also see some other stitching techniques as well. I'll look at one of these pieces here and just kind of show a little bit here of some of the different stitches. Got to take my glasses off for up close. This is a pillow top. Look at all the wonderful colors here. But if you can see this pink flower, this is long stitch and short stitch embroidery. Most of what's here is cross stitch, but you've got some couching, some back stitch. You've got long and short stitches here. I don't see any lazy daisies. But this has some metallic threads as well as cotton threads. And like I said, if this were something that were really important, like for a special event like a wedding, you might use silk threads. I've got several of these beautiful pillow tops here in the shop. I'd love for these to show up in somebody's home someday, so if you're interested, let me know. This one has got some of the beautiful bright blues. Again, as I said, if you know that the iconography or the significance of these, you could probably trace some of these elements back to particular parts of Palestine and particular parts of Palestinian culture. But from a standpoint of our knowledge, these are just ways of reflecting that traditional Palestinian stuff. These are made commercially. These are not necessarily intended to be cultural artifacts. Women in the camps make these. My friend Allah brings them here to the States, and we sell them to help support folks in those areas. One more pillow top I've got has some wonderful Middle Eastern kind of fabrics, and then you've got a band of motif there in the middle that kind of shows off more of this. The one piece I have that I feel reminds me most of traditional Palestinian culture as I've traveled in the Middle East is this table runner, and I love the tassels and a really pretty simple design and very striking colors there, but what a lovely piece. And it's a way of kind of honoring and thinking about the culture of that region. As I said, these are commercial pieces, so I have a couple of little clutches here with Tatreez embroidery on them. One of the reasons I like having these in the shop is because they are so well made. The stitching and all the work that goes into these, there's a zippered pocket here. These are very well done, and understanding that they might have been stitched and put together in some pretty trying situations makes them even more impressive. So there's a couple of little clutches with the white background. I've got some of these black ones that makes the red much more striking there. Change purses if you're looking for just a little fun something with, again, some of the wonderful images from that region, and even little keychains. There's a little floral design. These would certainly have been more for commercial audience, for trade, than necessarily to reflect family or tribal or village heritage. But they do give us an idea of the bright colors and the wonderful images and motifs that are present in Tatreez embroidery. I haven't been back to the Middle East in a very long time. I traveled to Israel way back in the mid-'80s and was able to then travel a little more extensively in some of the West Bank and Gaza areas. That area has been tense, as we all know, for centuries, and it's really tragic that all the people there of all different backgrounds feel the kind of tension and the struggle that goes on there. And you know, my thoughts are always with people who are in areas where that kind of stress and tension is present. Warfare is not something I think that any of us who know anything about it would feel comfortable supporting. But without getting into all the politics and taking sides on it, I just wanted to take some time today and look at these wonderful cultural artifacts from Palestine and the Tatreez tradition. I well remember when I was visiting Israel back in the 1980s, the tour guide that was with our group for a very long time, 8 or 10 days, was Palestinian, and you know, the love of his country and the love of his traditions and his culture were very obvious. He happened to be a Palestinian Christian, but Palestinians themselves adhere to all sorts of religious faiths, just like anybody else in the world. A lot of Muslim influence, and that again is reflected in the geometric patterns and the florals, rather than using other images in their stitching. I think I probably talked about that a little bit in a past week, where because of Islam's dislike of kind of carrying forward human images and things like that, that you're much more likely to have the striking geometric patterns there. Well, that's just a very quick little look, and again, kudos to the Embroiderers Guild of America for doing an international series and for taking some time to highlight Tatreez embroidery. If you don't know much about it, you might go in and look at what the Embroiderers Guild has on their website, or do a little more digging and thinking about what this wonderful tradition reflects, and how stitching is part of the heritage of all cultures and all people all over the world. So we're finishing up July here in Florida and heading off into a few more warm days of August. But as always, this is Gary Sly. It's great to have those of you who've been following and watching my videos out there in the world. This is Gary Sly and the Legacy of Handmade Objects, and I hope you have a wonderful week.